G'day. Welcome to Central Coast. This is my brave Australia, Central Coast. I want to firstly say thank you to everyone for being here today, for sharing your Sunday afternoon with us. Give a special welcome to the Central Coast, to all our friends and family that have travelled here to be here today. We've got people here from Queensland, Canberra and Melbourne, and we've also got someone all the way from Texas. So our Texas native has lived in Australia for 20 years, but I think, having Tracy here today, we can call it an international audience. So my name's Greg Smith, and I run a community group called Men Care Too. It's aimed at increasing awareness and recognition for men that are in unpaid informal caring roles. And Men Care Too is a producer of this show, but have done it with a lot of help from some pretty special individuals and community groups and organisations that have all pitched in to make today happen, and also the cast members that you're going to hear the stories from today. Firstly, I'd like to invite Jeff Amato up to pay our respects and acknowledge the country we're meeting on today, and Jeff's also going to share a little bit about the work that he does. Please put your hands together for Jeff.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Greg. I feel privileged to be here today to do acknowledgement to country. A little bit about me. I've travelled around Australia now for the last 2.5 years, telling my story on how I broke the lifestyle of addiction, incarceration, and everywhere I go, I think the most important thing for me to do is acknowledge the country I'm on. So I was invited here today by Greg. I've been doing a little bit of work with Greg over the last month, and so I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land we're on here today, and that's the Dark and young people, to our elders past and present, and to our next generation coming forward. A little bit about me. My name's Jeff Amato, and I'm a proud Wiradjuri man from Electro, New South Wales. I grew up there all my life. And what I do, how did I get to the Central Coast? I had to come to the Central Coast now over 10 years ago to better my life from addiction and alcoholism. And the way I got to the Central Coast, I ended up at a place that I call my second home here on the Central Coast, and that's the Glen Rehabilitation Centre. And the brothers are up the back, and I couldn't imagine my life today if it wasn't for that place. And that's what that place is about. It's about men sitting around talking about honest conversations. And that's the only way I could heal. All my life I was a guy that went through life thinking there was no other men struggling the way I'm struggling, until I got to that place and sat around and I heard men talk about their stories. I heard men talk about how they healed, and once I heard that, it gave me relief that I'm not the only man struggling. I'm not the only man struggling in this lifestyle, And I'm fortunate enough now to be travelling around Australia, telling my story on how I broke the lifestyle of addiction, incarceration, and I couldn't do that without the place, I hold so close to my heart, and that's the Glen. I get emotional when I talk about the Glen, because it saved so many men's lives. So I just want to say thanks to Greg and the rest of the mob here today to invite me to acknowledge country, because, like I say, I think that's the most important thing we have to do before we start any event. So thanks a lot, Greg, and I look forward to sitting down and listening to some stories. Thank you.
So it is emotional to get up and talk. I know that, personally I'm happy to stand up and talk in front of people, but it gets pretty hard sometimes if you're talking about personal things, which our storytellers are going to do today. And I think it's only fair that I share a little bit about my own way of looking at things. So I've written it down because it is hard to just naturally say it, but so we're here today as part of Mental Health Month, and it also happens to be that this past week is National Carers Week. And caring for a family member or friend who lives with an illness or disability lives with an illness or disability is rewarding and significant, but it's not without its emotional and mental challenges, which we often keep hidden and pushed down or to the side, because you have to be strong and reliable for the person that you love and care for. For over 20 years now, I've, by definition, been a carer. And a few years back, I started to recognise that my way of thinking and living was not heading down a good path. I'm generally a pretty quiet person, and for as long as I can remember, my self-esteem's been pretty low. I often feel awkward and out of place wherever I go, and I prefer to blend into the crowd, no matter where I am, and I feel like I could quietly slip away and no one would notice. That lack of social connection and purpose outside of my caring role was the fuel on the fire to all these negative ways of thinking, and I knew that things had to change. I'm on a better path now. I'm trying to build purpose and connections through the work I do with Mencare 2, and sharing more openly with the people in my life. It's not easy. I still keep a lot of things to myself. I still feel the need to always be strong and reliable. And as far as feeling awkward, standing here today in front of 100 people talking doesn't help that. But the way I look at it is that I'm having a go, and that's the best thing I can do. And there are 9 awesome people here today that are also having a go. 9 brave individuals who are going to step on this stage and share part of their life story in their own special way. At times, these stories can be a little bit hard to hear. Some are heartbreaking, but there is a special strength and determination in each of our storytellers. And please know that it's okay if you need to step outside for a break. That's okay. Someone will come and check on you. If it gets a bit hard, we have our cup of courage here on the stage, and it's up here for our cast to draw from if needed, and we invite you to do the same. So let's kick things off with the man who brought This Is My Brave Australia to Australia. He lives in Canberra, but we won't hold that against him. I'd like to ask you to put your hands together for Tim Daly.
Not sure I like to dig about Canberra there. Yes, my name's Tim Daly. I'm the founder of This Is My Brave Australia. This Is My Brave actually started in the US. A wonderful woman called Jennifer Marshall. She was diagnosed with bipolar, and her world just basically fell apart from then on. And out of that, once she started her recovery, she noticed that the people who didn't understand what mental illness was stayed away, wouldn't talk to her, and would just, basically it felt like she was being ignored and was invisible. And she studied, looked at, and found out that that was stigma that happens to most people who are suffering from mental illness. And what she wanted to do was find out a way to break that stigma. And she came upon storytelling to break stigma. And the reason that she did that is that a lot of people just aren't exposed to the stories and the lives of people who suffer from mental illness, so they don't understand what happens to them during their lives. All they see is, at times, is in the news, the terrible stories of violence that could be attributed to people with mental illness. Most time it's not, but that's all people see. But that's only that fraction of what happens to a person with mental illness. There's so many other people who are just living their lives, have a job, have family, do everything that we do, that everybody else does, but manages a mental illness at the same time, which to me, that makes them the strongest people that I know. Because if you can do all that and live with a mental illness and manage it, there's something special about you. There's a friend of mine who I was talking about this on the way up, who's told the story in one of our shows, who's a lawyer. Now, most people, family, your parents always want you to be a doctor or a lawyer. That's sort of the pinnacle of what you can be to be successful. So this person is a lawyer. They achieved that. But if you go back through their story, that story does not lead to being a successful lawyer in any way, shape or form. There's problems in the family from a young age. There's bipolar in there. There's homelessness. There's marriage breakups. All this, all the way through this story. And it's not a fun story. It's a tragic story. But the end result of that is they're a lawyer. They persevered through that, managing their mental illness, and came out the other end. And we want to tell stories like that because we want people to know that it's possible to do that you can live with a mental illness and still be a productive, not be a productive, but have a productive and fulfilling life. My story is that I've suffered on and off over the years with anxiety and depression. It doesn't come and go, it's always there, but it's more severe at other times. But I got to a time in my life where everything crowded in on me eventually. So there was stress. My father died, not unexpectedly, but then my brother died unexpectedly. Then my wife was diagnosed with MS, all within a sort of a 5-year period. I was the general manager of a large business, so I had lots of employees to look after. There was stress involved that. But I was a bit of a typical bloke. I just took it all on. It was me. I was going to look after it. I was going to handle it. And I spent no time on myself. So eventually it manifested in a physical way, and I collapsed at work. And I was unconscious on the ground. I was taken to hospital in an ambulance, and they did every test and check that you could think of, brain scans, heart checks, everything, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. It happened again on a plane, flying into Sydney, collapsed on the plane. And this is another first for me. Ambulance off the tarmac at Sydney Airport. It's not a fun thing to do, a way to exit Sydney Airport. Still went into the hospital, they did all the scans, they couldn't find anything. Finally, I was diagnosed as extreme anxiety. My brain just said, Tim, enough's enough. Just lie down. You can't do it anymore. But when I collapsed the first time as a physical manifestation, everybody I knew, friends, family, especially work colleagues, because it happened at work, they sent me flowers and cards and get well notes. I got everything, and I felt quite good that people were supporting me and doing it that way. As soon as I announced that it was anxiety and depression, there was silence. I didn't have one person, not one person, ask about how I was. And to me, that just shattered me, and I felt so isolated. It's bad enough having anxiety and depression and feeling that you're unwanted and unloved, but then when people nearly confirm it for you, and I went, what's this all about? After 8 weeks of me being on sick leave, I returned back to work, and I was given the letter to say, we're making you redundant. Here's your payout. Sorry, you don't have a job anymore. It was a good thing and a bad thing, because the bad thing was obviously I don't have a job anymore. The good thing was that my wife had been diagnosed with MS, and we had to make a decision about what happened with her care. So what this freed me from work responsibilities so I could be her full-time carer. So it was a bit of a silver lining to it. But what it made me think was, I'm luckily enough that I was brought up, had an education, I could go out and get another job. I could do all those things, and I had lots of family support. My sister's in the audience, has come up from Melbourne today. So I've got lots of family support. I've got a big family, so that's not something that worries me. But what worried me was, what about the people who don't have that support? What about people who, single mothers, single fathers, people who don't have family right next to them. What happens to them when the stigma attacks them? What happens when they lose their job when stigma is attached to them? What happens when they become homeless because people attach stigma to their mental illness and say, well, you can't have a job, you've got a mental illness. I can't give you that job. Or I can't give you the promotion, I can't do this, I can't do that, because you've got a mental illness. And that just infuriated me. That just made me so angry. So I latched onto the whole storytelling thing. So that's what I wanted to do. And I basically Googled storytelling mental health, put the two words together. Up came This Is My Brave. And I looked into it and I thought, wow, that's pretty powerful. Looked at some of the videos they do in their shows. And thought, that's great, that's something I can do, because my background was in events. This is what I did for a living anyway, so I could put those two things together. So I was relatively green on the mental health side, but knowledgeable on the event side. So I rang up Jennifer in America and said, I want to do This Is My Brave Australia. And she said, yeah, all right. Then I had to do it, so that's the next step. So I actually had to do it. So with a group of friends, we put on our first show in 2017. We've done shows in Canberra, we've done shows in Perth, we've done shows in New South Wales, in Mullumbimby recently, done another couple of shows in Canberra. We've just finished a season of mental health film festivals, just another way to tell stories about mental health. We did one in Canberra, we did one in Melbourne, we did one in Perth. We're all about storytelling to basically get those stories into the spotlight so people can hear what actually goes on in the life of someone who has a mental illness. And what we want to do is take them into communities. I'm a firm believer that statistics and data do not tell the story of mental illness. There can be so many reports come out, but they do not tell the true story. This tells the true story. People getting up and telling their raw, authentic stories will let you know what is actually going on in the life of someone who has mental health issues. And you'll be surprised what goes on in their lives, and you'll be surprised how strong they are. Someone said to me today, I've heard these stories, I don't understand how those people are still standing. And it's true, they're so strong. There's such a strength there of these people. And if you focus on the mental illness and forget about the strength that they've actually got, then you're missing the whole story. You really are. So that's why I do this, and that's why I want so many people from the communities to listen to the stories of people who live in their communities, because it is real then. Because I know there's a lot of people who are family or friends or neighbours or something like that in this room, and you'll be able to look at that person and go, wow, what a person, I know that person, this is happening in my community. And hopefully what we do is stop stigma. That's what we want to do, is stop that stigma. And everybody in this audience goes out with their mind changed and spreads it out into the community. So no, don't think about people with a mental illness like that. You need to think about it like this. I went to this show and I heard all these people telling their stories. You need to change the way that you think about it. So that's why we're here today. This is why we've assembled this wonderful cast of people and this wonderful support crew of people who are putting the show on, all from the Central Coast. So they're all local community people. So I'm also a little bit against people flying in, telling a bunch of stories, then flying out and having nothing to do with the community. This stays in the community that the show is in, and that's what I want to see, a legacy staying in the community itself. That's enough from me. There's a lot of stories to be told. Thank you all for coming. And I'd like to introduce Ava, who's our next performer. Thank you.
Hello! I'm back again. I was only here a few hours ago, but I'm here again. Hi! Don't you want me? Too bad. I'm here anyway. Let's nudge him closer. Oh, you want to go back to your friends? You know that that you were just that pity case, right? To make them feel good about themselves. They don't actually like you. Come on, a little closer. Stop biting me. Those chemicals can't keep me away Why? Because I said no. Well, actually, it's because I love it when you have a breakdown just before your exam. And who are you going to blame it on? You can't blame it on me. I don't exist, remember? Even if you did blame it on me, they would just say it's for attention. You know, it's funny. When I first came, you brushed me off like I was nothing. Look at me now. I'm practically in control of you. Come on. One more step and you're over the edge. Isn't this fun? Well, you're crying, but I'm laughing, so, oh well. What did I say about fighting me? I'm here to stay. I'm never going to leave. I'm never going to leave. Hi, my name's Al. I'm originally from the Central Coast and I basically moved up to Newcastle. That poem just heard was called In the Mind Of, and I wrote it when I was around 16, 17, and it says a lot about what I was going through at the time. My next, so if you haven't caught on, I'm a poet. I really love performance and slam poetry, and that's what I'll be performing today. My next poem is called Feel Light, and I wrote this poem when I was 18. Woo! My fuel light is on in my car again. It's the third time this week and it just keeps happening. People say that I'm simply telling people so they know that my fuel light is on. But I don't want anyone to know that I'm at a crossroad and I can see the train coming in the distance and I can't move. I'm stuck. The fuel light is on in my car and I can see the train and I'm slamming myself against the door yet I can't get out. I just can't. I'm back on the road again. I'm trying to keep moving forward, just like they say. And I can see the stars of my fuel light. I swerve again, but I'm back on the road. I'm okay. Smoke. There's smoke in my car and I'm stuck. It's surrounding me. It's choking me. I can't breathe. Please, help me. I can't breathe. And all I can see is my red fuel light in the thick haze. You can't have a fuel light, they say. You have a nice car. I have a nice car, so I can't have a fuel light, yet it's right there in front of me, taunting me. Why can't they see it? It's there, right against my dashboard. Why am I the only one who can see the red fuel light that is on in my car? So this next poem is called Conform, and it's one of my more recent poems. And although I like to write my poems so they're very ambiguous and up for personal interpretation, when I wrote this, I wrote it with the idea of trying to reach this level of enoughness within your community, when that level is set by someone who isn't even in your community. So this poem is called Conform. Inhale, hold, exhale. Inhale, hold, exhale. Let your identity wash away from you. Authenticity is a lie. Conform. If you want to live, that is. It is your job to make them feel comfortable. How dare you expect them to refer to you as something other than how they perceive you as? You don't even look the part. Wrapped up high, close the door and walk away from who you really are. Internalize everything. Conform, they say, or we will never treat you like one of us. Conform so they are the comfortable ones. Conform or they will drive you to your grave. Twist your body tight and spill out on the floor. Slice yourself wide open and rearrange your face to look more like them. Tear apart your chest flesh and hand them your soul and ask, am I enough yet? Conform. Until your bones are brittle, conform until the last drop of blood spills from your veins, conform until you no longer exist in our world. let's give some background on what sort of headspace I was in at the time. It was actually very positive, believe it or not. So one of my big influences in life is Laura Jane Grace, and she's an amazing punk rocker who, if you've heard of her, she's in a band called Against Me. And I met her for the second time at two of her shows. So I'm an out and proud queer person, and seeing another queer person being successful was amazing. 2 days later, another inspiration of mine, Eugene Lang from the YouTube channel The Try Guys Who Try Things, came out as gay. By the end of the week, 2 more YouTubers had came out, and seeing as a queer person myself and seeing other queer people successfully living their life and thriving as themselves is such a positive and great thing to see, and it makes me feel so awesome. And I wrote this poem, and it's called 41% Imposter. I have an itch. I have an itch under my skin which I cannot reach. I have an itch. It's making me want to tear my body apart to find this itch. Compress, wrap tape around your chest, compress. Spill gutter on the floor and rearrange them so you look like a human being. You're not Bill, you're not enough. You ran and cracked your ribs. Why did you run? Who are you running from? Is it the noose-holding man there at every corner, waiting for you to wrap it around your throat and pull? I'm suffocating. I'm choking. I don't want to die. I want to live. I will live. You are real, you are enough. Be ambitious, be Bill. You will have to fight. Fight with every limb you own in your body. You own your body. And you will survive this seamlessly endless fights. You will survive and thrive, just like him, like them, like her. You got this. We believe in you. A beautiful story in a great way on a whiteboard, and it's awesome. Please welcome Colin, everybody.
Alrighty. Afternoon. Thanks for coming to the meeting. Appreciate it. Brainstorming session. Always advisable to bring your own whiteboard markers because you know someone in the office has nicked them, right? You probably all know telling stories is hard. Probably all know that. I'm looking for the answers to how to tell mine. I'm looking for that something that connects me with who I am, myself, and who I'm perhaps looking to be, or perhaps who I need to find out that I am. And you know, trying to find my story, well, frankly, I ain't quite yet sure who I am, where I am, what I'm doing, what I'm going with it. What I do know is that I'm an ordinary bloke with a job that I spend my days in that I find really quite extraordinary. I work in an industry, the media industry, where I find ways of telling other people's stories through advocacy and roles like that. Problem I've got still, I ain't that good yet at telling my own story. I'm not completely sure, to be honest, what the beginning of that story even is. So, I've decided to use something that I use when I'm looking to tell someone's story. In my industry, we often throw about ideas, should I say. That's where you don't read the script, right? We often throw ideas about in a brainstorming session. So, would you please welcome to the brainstorm for my story. So I'm looking for a title. And I'm standing here in front of you on the precipice of the unknown, aiming to begin a journey. Life has made in the past few years, some very, very big changes. It's left me with so very many questions. It's left me with uncertainty, a lot of that. But the questions exist and they run around my brain like a rabbit chasing a carrot. What's the impact on my journey from the things that have gone on in my life? Systemic bullying when I was a young bloke. Adoption. Being kicked out of home at 16. Relationships that have shattered. And perhaps also some of the dumb things that I've chosen to do from time. So perhaps if we're talking about a journey, I wonder if this is the right label to use. Welcome to my story. This is my safari. It's about a journey, isn't it? There's a problem though with a journey. I have to pack my mental bags on this journey to get underway. It's a bit like my car. It's out there packed, ready to go to Coffs Harbour this afternoon to have a holiday from work. But there's a lot of packing that's involved. I think I was up till at least 1:30 on Friday morning packing my bags. On a safari for my own story, what will I face? I'll face a lot of unknowns, some painful truths, significant needs maybe. And I must have discipline. I need to pick the start point on the map. And I need it to be easy. Yeah, that'd be nice. This was an easy job. I need it to be today. Maybe I need it tomorrow. Maybe I've got a better idea. Oh, I know. This is probably a little bit hard right now. So maybe a better title for my story will be this. This is my couch. At which point, I can find myself a nice place to relax. I like it here. It's perfect. This is easier, right? This is the way it should be for today. I can do my safari tomorrow, next week. It's going to be more comfortable here. A whole lot more comfortable. It's a very nice couch to sit on. It's okay. It's really okay. If I just put off facing my demons or the things that I need to deal with, it's really okay to do that tomorrow. I don't have to think too hard on this couch. I can procrastinate, I can Facebook, I can watch YouTube, I can TV, spend time watching the idiot box, as my old man used to call it. I can fill my days with mindlessness. That's it. That's called procrastination in its finest form. Good at that too. Maybe sometimes I work too hard, but that's another way of avoiding things in a way, isn't it? This is perfect. But you know what the problem with brainstorming sessions are? Is that you ask the questions and you have to ask the question, is this perfect? Inactivity leaves my brain bored. Inactivity means that my problems haven't gone away, have they? Bugger. They're buried. They're hiding around the corner, waiting. And you know what? That's actually nerve-wracking. That's worrying. It fills me. And it leaves me open to, problems. And you know what? Sitting on the couch, inactivity, being bored, all that sort of thing. Wrong label. Maybe the story should start with what the result of sitting on the couch does. It's a long word. Yes, I made it. Bad behaviour. This is my story. This is my bad behaviour. The lack of activity in my life has created neglect. I've sought the pleasures. I sought the crutches, the things I didn't actually need, but I sought them because they were easier. And they made it sometimes feel like I was coping. I worked too hard. I spent too much time doing distractive things, working a lot, burying myself in for that, and for that I have people I need to apologise to. I missed so many things as a result, and I created damage, not only to me, but to people around me. I missed opportunities. I missed opportunities. And if there's one thing, though, this is at least being able to think through this and work this out. If there's one thing that makes you think, that's when you come up for air from your bad behaviour. And you start to question, you start to ask yourself this question. So maybe this label isn't right either. Maybe the story is this. This is my missing. It's not bad. It's the questions that have come. You know, I need to prepare for my journey. There's questions. What is there? There's that gaps. Remember, I talked earlier of uncertainty. I talked of the things that are leaving me sad, upset, betrayed, and hurt. I've got to ask the question, how is all of what I'm doing, or, well, not doing, working out for me? What's missing? What do I need? What do I need to look at? What do I need to prepare for? What's next? How do I prepare for? Oh, maybe that's the wrong label. Maybe this is the right label. This is my future. That could be a good label for a story. You know, there's an American poet. I don't read a lot of her, but I do like this comment from her. Sylvia Plath is her name. And she said once, I'm terrified of the dark things that sleep within me. Well, the missing. To reach my future, for anybody to, you need to be honest. You need to face up. I need to be honest. I need to face up. I need to face up to what paralyzes me. I need to be present in my own life. What do they say on the internet? You know, we all read Facebook, well, most of us do, and you get all those quotes, and the one that strikes me sometimes is apparently Japanese in origin: fall down 7 times, get up 8. Yeah. But I still have one issue, and that's the unknown. So again, maybe future isn't the right label. Maybe I need to acknowledge something first before this is the right label. The unknown, the way things are going to be different, the where am I going? Maybe that's the label. This is my fear as a story label. Maybe that works. I mean, when you start on a journey, when you start on a mental health journey, when you want to deal with the things that you've dealt with in your life, there's the what ifs, the lack of answers, the lack of direction, the feeling that at times I may be my own worst enemy. It's overwhelming, it's powerful, creates fear. What happens to my world if I make changes? What happens to me? Who am I going to become? But even fear has a but. I have the realization that I need to maintain the joy in my life. I have the realization that I need to walk forward, to walk beside what's gone on for me. I have the realization I need to grow. I know that I really need to let loose the bonds of my own slavery to my own past. I know I've got to be strong. I know I need to be resolute. I need to be disciplined. I must want this. I really must. And there's really only one way forward. It is scary. Change is frightening. But it does mean that for me, things may be different. It's my hope. things may be an adventure. And what's more fun than having an adventure in life, yeah? Because that's what life's about. Hope, adventure, courage. Going forward. So, maybe that's not the right label. But I tell you what I do need to think. I must rewrite my own story. I must be part of that, and I must now choose its heading. So, with a heart that beats a little faster, I must take that first step in my journey. Here is my story. This is my brave. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to introduce now to a bloke that's given me one of the favourite things I've ever heard in my life for quite some time. Our next person on stage is a songwriter. He also wears one of the best hats I've ever seen, and what he's about to share with you will leave you thinking. Would you please make welcome a new friend of mine, John?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's John. I'm from the Central Coast, originally from Sydney, and music's been a passion of my life all my life. And I've written this song especially for This Is My Brave, called Good Friends. And I wrote it when I was on holidays up near Foster in the North Coast with my wife Tracy. I wrote the lyrics up there, and when we came back I wrote the melody. And it just something very special to me that's in life, is that's my friends in my life that have got me through, and it's sort of in sort of tandem with this is Are You OK sort of movement that we've had recently, people reaching out for each other and friendship. And the first person I'd like to mention has been the biggest help in my life is my big brother Stephen. He's come down from the North Coast to see me play, and spend some time with me, and he's been a great support all my life. Secondly, Tracy has been married to me for 21 years. It is very special to me. It is my kindred spirit and soulmate, and really we've made such a good life together, and I really love her very much. And also her mother, Anne Walsh, was instrumental in putting us both together, which has been really special. So I'd like to play for you this afternoon a song that I've written called Good Friends. Thank you very much. Are you okay, my old friend? Are you doing fine? Can I talk to you right now? Is it a good time? We've been together for years and years, been through some tough times, yeah. But just right now, let's stop a while and put our work tools down. So listen now to what they say. Well, a man must live from day to day. So do what you do to keep yourself right. Don't sit in the dark, don't walk in the light. Well, do what you do to walk in the light, walk in the light. You are a man with worries for such a long, long time, but you are strong as they come and never will break down. In every way, people say you are a man of steel, but deep inside there's weakness every single day. So listen, listen, listen now to what they say, 'cause a man may live from day to day. So yeah, do what you do to keep yourself right. Don't sit in the dark, but walk in the light. Whoa, do what you do to keep yourself right. Don't sit in the dark, no, no, no. Walk in the light. I know, old friend, that you're happy, living a simple life, seeing good in people who are dancing in the night. So let us part for a short while and go our separate ways and clear our heads of all that stuff that gathers every day. When we come back home again, things will be the same. You have my friendship for all time, and this will never change. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Thanks very much. Next on the stage is my wife Tracy, and I'm sure you'll really appreciate her beautiful story. So welcome to the stage, Tracy.
Thanks. Oh, I've just been upstaged by 3 people. I have to work hard. Okay, I'm Tracy, I'm brave, and this is my story. I've been happily married to John for 21 years. I have a very supportive mum, 4 caring sisters, 2 good-natured beagles, and an arsehole of a cat named Harry. Harold, when he's naughty, he has anger issues. I'm here today to tell my story in the hope of lifting the stigma that surrounds mental illness and the prejudgment that all too often arises. I wish in the past I could have been brave enough to talk about my illness, but I was too worried about how I would be perceived, and I didn't want to be treated differently. Instead, I learned to hide my emotions, and I am very good at whipping out a happy face while choking back the tears. I remember clearly when I was 8 years old, my father would wrap his empty whiskey bottles in newspaper, drive me to the local shop so I could put them in the bin. his evidence of drinking was taken care of and the process continued. My father passed away when I was 10. He had cirrhosis of the liver due to alcoholism. Some years later, I remembered that I had disposed of his empty bottles. I became convinced that not only had I been his enabler, but I blamed myself for his death. I was riddled with guilt and I wanted punishment. So I started to self-harm by cutting myself, and it felt good. It wasn't until I was in my early 30s when my two nieces were both 8. That was the same age I had been while hiding his bottles. I realised then that I couldn't possibly be held responsible. I then was able to leave my guilt behind, but I was angry and I hated him. A few years later, I made peace with my dad. I forgave him. I let go. It was healing. I was a better person for it. The onset of my mental illness was in 1982 when I was 15. For 8 years, I was incorrectly diagnosed as having schizophrenia. I was placed on large doses of medications that didn't work. They made me tired, groggy, and I slept a lot. My life was a disaster. I had no friends, and other than my mum, I was alone. At 23 years old, I fell into the care of my current psychiatrist who diagnosed me with bipolar disorder, and she changed my medications, adding a mood stabiliser and changing up others. It made a huge difference. My life slowly improved. After I was on the right medication, I felt the fog in my brain lift. It was a wonderful experience. I saw aspects of my life differently. I sensed hope and I knew I would be okay. I still had many hospital admissions up until age 29, but I knew at last I was in good caring hands. From the ages 15 to 28, I spent more time in psych hospitals than out. I am both happy and proud to tell you today that I have just had 21 years without a hospital admission. Just a very brief one. Thank you. Thank you. I attribute this to my husband, John, he's not here, my mum, and my wonderful psychiatrist who I've had batting for me for the last 30 years. She's given me her mobile number for emergencies, which have been a lifesaver in dark times. She's always bulk billed, and for this I'm eternally grateful. Due to being in hospital, I miss milestone occasions such as my Year 10 farewell, my 18th and 21st birthday in hospital, as well as a couple of Christmases. In 1985, I was placed onto the invalid pension. This title did nothing to help the stigma of the mentally ill or my self-esteem. I've been told to get over it, have a warm bath, you have nothing to be depressed about, you shouldn't be taking tablets, or you are menopausal. The stigma is real. It is hurtful, harmful, and definitely not helpful. It's the pink elephant in the room. Any wonder we choose to wear a mask? John and I moved to the Central Coast in 2015, and it was a fresh start after 2 very serious car accidents. We love our life here. We have found a lot of support here. It has really helped us to get our lives back on track. John also has mental illness, so we understand how our symptoms can impact each other. If we are both not feeling great, we give each other space. We've recently bought a pair of Bluetooth headphones each, which we both take refuge in. I'm quite rude, actually. In our early days, we discussed children, but unfortunately, the very high chance of our children inheriting mental illness. So for this reason, we opted out. Last year, I started to do art therapy, and it is up there with one of the best things I have done to keep me well. I'm always relaxed and happy after a class. Lastly, I'd like to touch on ECT. It's electroconvulsive therapy, a measured dose of electrical current into the brain. It has always lifted me out of very dark times. It doesn't work for everyone, however, I've been lucky to respond to it. I recovered each time after a course of treatments. There's nothing like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. These days I take life one day at a time. I see my psychiatrist regularly. I take my medication and they keep me well. Life is good. I'm content and I'm happy. I won't give up on myself. I won't give up on John. And our arsehole cat Harry's here to stay too. Thank you. Please welcome to the stage our next storyteller who has a journey of finding purpose.
Thank you. Okay, I'm a mum of 3 daughters. When they left home, I had to rebuild my life in a different way. I've been in a relationship with my now fiancé for 6.5 years. He is my rock. I'm a granny. I'm a strong-willed person with strength, determination and purpose. As years went by, I became ill and isolated myself, curled in a ball like the armadillo, thick shell and rolled into a ball. I spent a lot of time sleeping. It was hard to leave the house. I had chronic pain and I was unable to work and I was highly medicated. Armadillo, no purpose, not a social creature. Roll into a ball when under threat. 2 surgeries later, I suffered from a neurological dysfunction and I had to rewire my brain and my ability to function in general. I have a nerve stim device in my back and it gave me a new lease of life. I started to connect with services, the Epic Centre at San Remo, Oasis Salvation Army and Parramatta Mission Individual Support Services. They helped me identify how I was going to do the next things in my life and build my future. Years later, my firstborn daughter, Jasmine, had her firstborn baby, Braxton, my grandson. Spending time with them helped me feel better, it made me happy, and we were all very close. It was so amazing. I now have my purpose back. I look after him weekly, and Jasmine and I would catch up and have dinner and sleepovers. People would say to me a lot, "You're so strong." How did they know? What am I strong for? Jasmine's mental health took a turn and she started to change, and she talked about dying. And as her mum, it was hard to understand why she wanted to do this and that I wasn't good enough for her to live. She had fear from her recent past, and she could not shift the thoughts of this. Sadly, in 2016, she died by suicide. Her unwell mental health state led her to also take her son, and they both died. Recently, I found this letter that she wrote. She said, "I was free of pain. I'm numb and my body shut down." Jasmine felt that no one was listening, and one of her very last quotes were, "It's funny what you can hide behind a smile." Jasmine loved Braxton. My world was torn apart. Armadillo, no purpose, not a social creature, thick shell and roll into a ball when under threat. As I mentioned before, I have a wonderful man, and he's been by my side for 6.5 years. He took a chance on me. He proposed, and he believed in me after the many years of pain, loss, heartache, and my armadillo phases. But it is so funny what you can hide behind a smile, because up until yesterday, he actually never knew that I was an armadillo. Sorry, dear. I know you're out there somewhere. Hi. After this happened, my thick skin armour developed stronger. I isolated myself, curled in a ball. How could I see my purpose now? I no longer had one of my children, and my firstborn and my first and only grandchild were gone. I again became an armadillo, sheltered, scared, and no purpose. How could I live without a life without them? Nobody cared. Nobody understood. Armadillo, not a social creature, isolated, no purpose. One day, I realised I had to pick myself up and rebuild my life. I started to see my doctor weekly. I started to exercise and go to the gym. You wouldn't think so. I met with my support services and I gained casual employment. I now work full-time, supporting young people with complex trauma and needs. I love my job. I now have a different purpose. On my journey, I believe the most important thing is that you fight hard for yourself. Our purpose will become clear. Everyone, even you, have a different purpose and a different journey in your life. Now I know what my purpose is. It's to start a foundation in my daughter's honour. Jasmine, your smile, and Braxton, your laugh, will never be forgotten. The show inspired me to start this foundation in honour of my daughter and my grandson. The foundation is jnbfoundation.godaddysites.com. It's a work in progress. Who am I now? Well, I'm me. Educated, determined, healing. I'm still soldiering on. I'm still an armadillo sometimes. I am a survivor. I am a hero in my own right. I Lisa. I'd now like to welcome to the stage a beautiful person called Jack and her piece called The Legacy.
Incest is an awful topic to have to discuss, yet it happens to 1 in 5 Australian children, and I am one of those. Incest happens when a trusted family member grooms the victim and their family. Grooming is intentional manipulation on behalf of the perpetrator. This means that the perpetrator knows exactly what they are doing and works to manipulate the family so they don't suspect what's going on. The act of incest and grooming is set up to silence and confuse the victim and their family members. In a child's mind, this confusion can translate into, it must be my fault that my relative is doing these things to me. And it is never, ever the child's fault. For me, as a child and teenager, I became hypervigilant and acutely anxious. I was always trying to stay a step ahead of the perpetrator so he couldn't get his hands on me. My distress levels were off the charts, especially when I was left in his care, and the worst when my parents left us with him for 6 weeks when they went on holiday. There was nowhere really that was a safe place anymore, and from a very young age, everything became about survival. I began to cry a lot at school, and nobody could work out what was wrong with me. I couldn't tolerate any change, and I started to pull away from my friends. I judged myself harshly, felt very dirty and undeserving, and special occasions, such as a first love interest in a young woman's life, were met with jealousy and rejection from the perpetrator. When I told about the abuse, it shattered my family, and any stability I had began to rapidly fall apart. The incest became a catalyst for my parents' marriage breakdown and later divorce. Members of my family were filled with horrifying levels of guilt over what the perpetrator had done and still do to this day. A lot of my extended family members rejected the news of the abuse, and my family were left to deal with it on their own. Life was never the same again. I love family and the extended family life, and it was completely gone in a very short period of time. My family went into total chaos. All other issues I dealt with were exacerbated, which just made it all the harder to see some way out of this confusion. I did have some very great experiences in these years, but all were tainted by the actions of the perpetrator. I was seeing a Freudian psychiatrist from 16 years on and off till I was 21 years of age. During this time, I wanted to focus more on the incest, but the psychiatrist was not able to refer me to anyone to be able to do this. He also told me that I wouldn't cope if I stopped seeing him. I did eventually leave and found a place called Dimpner House that held small group counselling for victims of incest. It was very confronting but healing in a lot of ways, especially hearing other members' stories. When I finished that group, I needed some substitute support, and I accessed the Women's Health Centre's Rape Crisis Phone Counselling line, who also supported women who experienced incest. They became my lifeline for the next 20 years of my life, for which I am eternally grateful. During my early 20s, I began to experience suicide ideation and was referred to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with dissociation. This psychiatrist informed me that if I didn't get help, I would end up on the streets eating out of bins. Even though this could have been said to me in a more gentle fashion, it was true what she said, because even though I didn't end up on the streets, I was not far from it. Along with other issues, the dissociation and other effects of the incest, it made it near impossible to secure work. This did improve as I started getting help, but it took a long time to find appropriate or consistent help. During this time, I educated myself the best I could. I saw different therapists, read books, and attended many workshops to learn skills to be able to manage the effects of the grooming and abuse, communicate effectively, set boundaries, and give myself self-care. The more debilitated I became, the more desperate I wished to become an effective part of the community. I still had my love of life, but with the increased physical and mental health symptoms, the further away this reality became. I did share some living spaces with people, but I ended up living more and more on my own, which only made the debilitation worse, and the depression, anxiety, rumination, and loneliness were crippling. I did manage to get some work along the way, but I chose hard physical work, and my body was in no condition to take this on. I suffered massive performance anxiety and panic attacks during and after work, which was like a mild form of torture, but I did it. I had lost and got rejected from many employment training programs, but I am proud of myself for how I persevered in trying to secure work. This went on for most of my 20s, 30s, and 40s. The incest had locked me in a cage, but I was determined to break it down so that I could experience the freedom I could see that existed outside of it. In my 20s and 30s, I existed on $175 a fortnight after I had paid my rent, and my appearance and body image began to strongly reflect that. I came from a middle-class family, but asking for help was not easy to do or at all. I took the perpetrator to court in my 20s, and he was acquitted, but again, I am very proud of myself for doing this. I sort of got my own justice on the court day by looking directly at the perpetrator, who was unable to meet my gaze even once. Despite the baggage and effects I was carrying from the incest, I did manage to participate in friendships to the best of my ability. I love animals, nature, dance, movement, and film and performance theatre. I became involved in festival activities, as hard and confronting and triggering as it was. It is important to point out that I was still me through all of this. I had my own personality in life just like everyone else, even if it may look very different. Having said that, as I got older, I felt I had less and less dignity and choice. It was very demoralising, shameful, and humiliating. I had to endure a lot of victim blaming from people close and far from me due to denial and/or ignorance or shame. It is now in my 49th year of life that I am receiving treatment and support that is consistent and abundant to me. I am very weary, but I am doing my best to persevere, as things are starting to improve in ways I have hoped they would for many years. Today, as a result of all the work I've done on myself and the love I've been given, I do feel more lovable, worthwhile, compassionate, and accepting towards myself. This also includes my sexuality and body image, which are getting a little stronger. Incest leaves a legacy that has long-term effects and is made worse when not resolved, stopped, or talked about. If it is not resolved, it leaves the victim with a huge burden to carry on their own. So I would encourage everyone, family members and friends, to talk about it so that victims can have a chance at remaining close to their families and receiving the loving embrace the family unit can give. And also, the victims and survivors can receive the highly skilled, consistent, long-term treatment and support they deserve. This is my brave. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I'd now like to introduce onto the stage a beautiful lady called Daly. Please welcome her.
Hello, my name's Alison Terry. If you told me I would be standing here today and talking to you about my mental health, I wouldn't have believed you. And I certainly wouldn't have believed that I could do it. But here I am, feeling scared, feeling vulnerable, and trying with all my heart to be brave. I never imagined that I would become mentally unwell. It was not my fault, and I didn't do anything wrong. It was just symptoms of circumstance. It was through personal experiences and traumatic events that I found myself struggling with depression, generalised anxiety disorder, and panic attacks. The story I'm going to tell you today is my own. It's part of me, but it's not all of me. Mental illness hasn't beaten me. It came close, I can honestly say, on more than one occasion. But here I stand with my shoulders back, my head held high with a smile and a tear in my eye as I tell you my story. According to plan, at 30 years old, I was pregnant. I was ready, I was prepared, and I was experienced. After all, I was a teacher. I did the prenatal classes and I wrote my birth plan. I was going to be a wonderful mother. It was my dream come true. We were going to be so happy. You know, some people actually say,
cesareans are the easy way out.
but what happens when the birth doesn't go to plan? What happens when they're saying things that I don't understand? What happens if I've already done the best that I can? I wake up, I am sick and sore, but my son is in my arms. A few days later, I'm told, you're good to go home. You'll be okay. You know, some people actually say,
You will just know what to do.
but what happens when you bring your baby home and he won't sleep? What happens if he's not putting on weight after a week? What happens when they ask you questions and you can't speak? I get up each day, one after the next. I can't stop to shower and I forget to eat. The phone rings, I ignore it. He cries, I cry. I cry, he cries. This is not okay. You know, some people actually say,
You just need some time to yourself.
but what happens when you feel like you have no time to spare? What happens if he needs you and you're not there? What happens if you've got feelings that you just can't share? I try to talk to someone, but they're not listening. I am drowning. I'm having trouble breathing. I'm not okay. You know, some people actually say,
It will get easier.
but what happens when the days bleed into each other? What happens when you feel like a terrible mother? What happens when it's taking too long to recover? I start thinking, I want this to end. I can't keep going. I'm not coping. I've had enough. It's all too much. They'd be better off without me. I'm really not okay. You know, someone finally said,
This happened to me.
what happens when I understand what is wrong? What happens when the confusion is gone? What happens when I can find a way to finally be strong? I am okay. According to plan, at 40 years old, I'm living on a property. I am older, more confident, self-assured. The past is behind me. I'm planning my future. I have so much to be grateful for. Everything is okay. You know, some people actually say,
A change is good.
but what happens when you've moved away from your family? What happens when I lose someone dear to me? What happens when it sneaks up again, unexpectedly? I thought it was all said and done. I thought that it had finally been and gone. I have a new life and a beautiful home. I thought I was okay. You know, some people actually say,
It's all in your head.
but what happens when you become frightened? What happens when all your senses are heightened? What happens when your chest begins to tighten? Why does my body feel weak? Why can't I sleep? Don't leave me alone. I can't even leave my home. I'm not okay. You know, some people actually say,
Just think positive.
but what happens if your thoughts are hazy? What happens if you think you're going crazy? What happens when you have 2 boys that need raising? I crumble, I fall. I'm going to fight once more. What did I learn from before? I will be okay. You know, someone actually said,
There are many others just like you.
what happens when I understand what is wrong? What happens when the confusion is gone? What happens when I can find a way to be strong? I am okay. It wasn't according to plan to be standing here today. I am nearly 50 and my boys have grown. I have an amazing husband and a lovely home. And I know through my life experiences I have truly grown. You know, I don't care so much about what people say. I try to show gratitude for every day. And if I see someone else struggling, I try and help them on their way. I don't know what the future holds, but you know what? That's okay. You might be wondering where these life lessons have led me. I can proudly say I work as a program facilitator for the Iris Foundation, helping to reduce the risk of suicide on the Central Coast. I work with children in local primary schools, teaching emotional resilience, positive peer relations, and mental wellness. And all this is done through loving support and guidance. My healing journey continues, and I'm still growing as a person. I'm sharing this with you because if you are struggling emotionally or someone else that you love is, I want you to know there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Would I go through all I have again if I knew this is where I would be right now, in this moment, in a heartbeat? Don't be afraid to share your story because it could be someone else's. Remember that the path you have walked smooths the way for others. Thank you. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Lynn. She's going to share her inspiring and truly courageous story with you.
I feel like Linus, I've got my blanket. I'll fix it for you, Lynn. Thank you, Chief. So when? Okay, can you, I'm sure they can all hear me. Thank you. Can you put, it's gone. Okay, so trauma, mental health and creativity have very close ties. Some of us who've experienced these events in our life choose to express what we've held inside through our art, craft, music, dance, poetry, or story. I chose the written word. This is my story, my path to healing, from the silence and pain of trauma to embracing an inner peace through creativity. As a child, reading a book was what captivated my imagination, taking me on the grandest of adventures, filling my head with dreams and wild ideas, and a belief that the world really was full of magic. Sadly, those fairy tales and the vivid imagination of my childhood would not continue to the happily ever after. The values I was taught as a child, love, respect, trust, honesty and loyalty, would be shattered over the coming years, beginning when I was sexually abused by a family member from age 9 to 13. In my teens, I became pregnant, kicked out of home, and like many other girls of my era, sent to live in a home for unwed mothers. Later, I was forced to have my child adopted, and this was to a family that I knew. Ever since then, it has torn me apart that they only ever see me as someone they know, not as their mother, grandmother, or great-grandmother. A couple of years later, I was raped by a friend's brother and 5 of his mates. Then, while seeking support through the church, I was raped by the priest. I've been homeless, broke, slept on beaches, had meals from Salvation Army shelters, lied and stole to survive. These are some of the secrets and the shame that I have lived with for many years. I married at 28, had a family, and was finally happy. But later, my husband was diagnosed with health issues, including bipolar disorder, and the behaviour of our teenage son and daughter was causing problems, and the family I had always hoped for slowly began to unravel. Diagnosed with a type of cancer that was rare and hard to treat, I was told by a GP I would not survive 5 years. 2 years later, doctors discovered a degenerative spinal condition that will eventually see me in a wheelchair. I found the courage to end my marriage. Sadly, though, a consequence of that decision was the relationship with my daughter and her family also crumbled. I was not the mother she wanted, but I was the best mother that I knew how to be. For years, I had hidden my shame and the feelings of being worthless, unlovable, lonely, lost, and incredibly sad. But slowly, it began to eat away at me and impact on my own health and well-being. I decided I was going to create a different story, a story I have no idea where it's leading. Well, I sort of do, but I'm not telling you. But I know that never, ever will it say I gave up. Deciding to move beyond the limiting beliefs that had kept me trapped, I wanted to find that happy, carefree little girl again. I returned to my first love of reading and writing and began to learn more about writing as a way of healing. Pens and notebooks became constant companions, helping me through the power of words to make sense of my life. I learned from Brené Brown that if you own the story, you get to write the ending. Taught the art of journaling and writing as a way of healing by the best of mentors and teachers, I also learned the true power of a story shared. Using the pen as my sword and the page as my shield, I began a battle. I needed to write myself out of my past. At first, I couldn't find the right words. It was painful, raw, humiliating, degrading, embarrassing, and extremely emotional. But slowly, it began to feel more liberating every time I formed a sentence. I felt stronger as each word flowed from my pen. And eventually I sensed a shift in my mental health and well-being. Finally able to write about what happened to me in my own words, expressing the feelings, the thoughts, and the emotions was incredibly cathartic and empowering for me. I began to sense that I was, with every word, freeing myself from the shackles of the perpetrators, those who by instilling fear, shame and blame in me thought they had my silence. This was the point that I truly forgave myself and began to enjoy this new emerging me. So watch out. From feeling like a bare and lonely old tree following the ravages of a cold and brutal winter, I slowly began to sense the coming spring, the new growth bringing hope and renewal. All that stuff in my head and heart, by putting it on the page, I was rewriting my story. Writing helped me to process the baggage that I'd been carrying for most of my life, freeing me from the shame and helping me heal. It taught me to love, trust, and believe in myself. Gave me hope and clarity about my life, creating self-acceptance, freedom, and a new perspective on life. When you journal, you really do embark on a voyage to the interior, writing only for you. You don't have to share your writing with anyone unless you choose to, and you certainly don't have to worry about getting rapped over the knuckles for incorrect spelling, grammar, or punctuation. I found my special tribe with the International Association for Journal Writing, and connecting with others across the globe, we write, share, and listen. Through this, we can also heal. Our writing is a precious gift to ourselves and to others. My heartfelt gratitude to the Director, Council, and the members of the IAJW for embracing me and accepting me into their circle. You have changed my life. I read and believe that stories are the communal currency of humanity. We all have a story. We tell it and someone listens. As the narrator, we hope when you listen, you understand and show compassion, because when we choose to share our story with you, we're freeing a part of us that has kept us feeling ashamed, isolated, and alone for far too long. I would like all my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and my siblings to know my story and the real truth. Perhaps then they will be proud to acknowledge my presence in their life, rather than being judgmental of someone they never knew, accepted, or understood. One day someone might remember my story and say, to quote Dr. Rachel Remen from Kitchen Table Wisdom, "Look how she resisted, made it through, forgave herself, and told the truth. Maybe I can do that too." By telling our stories through whichever medium, It might just be the key that unlocks someone else's prison. Told I had less than 5 years to live after a cancer diagnosis. That was 20 years ago last July. Thank you. Being told I was worthless and would never amount to anything. I've just completed a diploma in journal therapy with distinction. They were other people's beliefs, not mine. The rocks that they threw at me over those years, I have used to build my own castle. That happy, carefree little girl has returned, and I like her. This and much more is why at 71 years young, I chose to be brave. Thank you.